London, 1829. The morning fog clung to the cobblestones of Mayfair as Marion Pemberton adjusted her worn shawl against the October chill. At 35 years of age, she had long accepted her place in the household, neither servant nor true family, but somewhere uncomfortably between. Her younger brother's wife, Catherine, made certain Marion understood the charity extended to her, though the word itself was never spoken aloud. "Aunt Marion, do hurry," called her niece Arabella from the carriage already waiting at the curb. The girl's voice carried that particular tone of impatience reserved for those who must wait upon their inferiors. "We shall be late for the modiste, and Lady Thornbury has already secured the morning's best appointment time." Marion gathered the parcels Catherine had thrust into her arms: fabric samples, fashion plates torn from La Belle Assemblée, a list of requirements written in Catherine's imperious hand. She climbed into the carriage with as much dignity as one could muster, while laden like a pack mule, settling onto the backward-facing seat without being asked. Arabella, 17 and beautiful in the way of girls who have never known hardship, arranged her azure pelisse with studied care. Beside her sat her sister Louisa, 15 and already showing signs of surpassing even Arabella's considerable charms. Both girls possessed their mother's golden hair and porcelain complexion, gifts that nature had inexplicably withheld from Marion, who bore her father's darker colouring and angular features. "Mamma says we must have new gowns for the Sinclair ball," Arabella announced, studying her reflection in a small hand mirror. "She believes the Duke of Harrington will be in attendance, and it would be most advantageous if he were to notice me." "The Duke of Harrington?" Louisa leaned forward with interest. "But surely he is too old for you, Bella. Why, he must be at least 30. "He is 32, Arabella corrected with a superior air, "and age matters little when one possesses a dukedom, 3 estates, and an income of £40,000 per annum." She glanced at Marion with barely concealed disdain. "Is that not so, Aunt? You would certainly overlook such trifling matters as age or appearance for such a prize, I imagine." Marion kept her expression neutral, a skill honed over years of similar barbs. "I imagine the Duke will choose according to his own preferences, whatever they may be." "His preferences are well documented," Arabella replied. "Lady Thornbury told Mamma that he seeks a bride of impeccable breeding, beauty, and youth, someone who can grace his table and provide heirs without difficulty." The unspoken comparison hung in the air, everything Marion was not and could never be. The modiste's shop on Bond Street was a flutter of activity, with seamstresses pinning and measuring, while Catherine held court among the fashion plates. Marion was relegated to a corner chair, charged with recording the endless specifications for each gown, the precise shade of ribbon, the number of flounces, the style of sleeve. Her own clothing needs went unmentioned, as they always did. The grey merino she wore had been turned twice already, the cuffs carefully repositioned to hide the worst of the fraying. "Miss Pemberton," the modiste addressed her only once, and then with visible reluctance, "your sister-in-law inquires whether you require anything for the upcoming season?" Marion felt the weight of Catherine's expectant gaze, recognized the test for what it was. To ask for anything would be deemed presumptuous. To demur would prove her awareness of her place. "I am quite content with my current wardrobe, thank you. Perhaps a new fichu would be practical, if one could be managed without inconvenience." Catherine's smile was thin and satisfied. "How sensible you are, Marion. It is one of your few admirable qualities." She turned back to the modiste. "The grey cambric will suffice for my sister-in-law. Something serviceable and modest." As autumn progressed toward winter, Marion's days fell into their familiar pattern. She rose early to help the younger children with their lessons, accompanied Catherine on morning calls, read aloud to her brother Thomas in his study while he attended to correspondence, and spent her evenings with needlework in the corner of the drawing-room while the family entertained guests. She was present but peripheral, acknowledged but ignored, useful but unvalued. The Sinclair ball arrived on a crisp November evening. Marion had spent the afternoon dressing Arabella and Louisa, arranging their hair, fastening their jewels, listening to their excited chatter about which gentleman might request their hands for dancing. Her own preparation consisted of pressing her one evening dress, a burgundy silk that had been fashionable a decade ago, and pinning her dark hair in a simple knot. "Gracious, Aunt Marion," Arabella remarked upon seeing her, "that gown is positively ancient. Do try to keep to the shadows this evening. We should not want anyone thinking you belong to our party." The Sinclair ballroom blazed with candlelight reflected in crystal chandeliers. The cream of London society swirled across the floor in a kaleidoscope of silk and satin, while musicians filled the air with Strauss. Marian followed her family inside, immediately seeking the row of chairs where chaperones and companions gathered, those women rendered invisible by age or circumstance. "Mrs. Blackwood," she greeted the elderly widow beside her, a woman whose acid tongue was legendary among the ton. "Miss Pemberton. Come to watch your nieces collect admirers like posies, have you?" Mrs. Blackwood's eyes, sharp despite her 70 years, missed nothing. "That elder one has set her cap for the Duke of Harrington, unless I miss my guess." "So I understand," Marian replied neutrally. "Ambitious chit. The Duke is not so easily caught as all that." Mrs. Blackwood leaned closer, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "They say he has exacting standards. His late mother was a woman of exceptional character, and he seeks the same in a wife. Beauty alone will not suffice." Marian watched Arabella curtsy to a succession of young men, her laugh carefully modulated to suggest delight without enthusiasm, interest without eagerness. It was a performance Marian had witnessed countless times, and she found herself wondering what it must be like to perform perpetually, to never simply exist as oneself. The evening proceeded as such events always did. Marian accepted a glass of orgeat from a passing footman, made conversation with other wallflowers, and tried not to notice how carefully people's eyes slid past her, as though meeting her gaze might somehow acknowledge her existence in ways that made them uncomfortable. She had become expert at rendering herself negligible, at occupying space without claiming it. She did not notice him at first. The Duke of Harrington entered without fanfare during a country dance. His arrival marked only by the subtle shift in the room's energy, the way conversations paused mid-sentence and eyes turned as though pulled by invisible threads. Marian, intent on retrieving a dropped fan for Mrs. Blackwood, only looked up when the elderly woman gripped her arm with surprising strength. "The Duke," Mrs. Blackwood breathed. "By merciful heavens, the man has presence." Marian followed her gaze to the figure now standing near the ballroom entrance. The Duke of Harrington was not what she had expected. Society's description had led her to anticipate someone polished and remote, a man whose wealth and position rendered him somehow separate from common humanity. Instead, she saw someone who appeared almost uncomfortable with the attention directed his way, his posture suggesting he would prefer to be anywhere else. He was tall, certainly, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command, but there was nothing arrogant in his manner. His features were strong rather than handsome, a face more interesting than beautiful, with intelligent grey eyes that surveyed the room with what Marian recognized as carefully concealed weariness. His evening clothes were impeccably tailored but understated, speaking of wealth secure enough not to proclaim itself. "They say he rarely attends such functions," Mrs. Blackwood continued. "His estates keep him occupied, and he finds society rather tiresome. Lady Sinclair must have employed considerable persuasion to secure his presence." Within moments, the Duke was surrounded by eager mammas and their daughters. Arabella positioned herself strategically, managing an introduction through Lady Thornbury. Marian watched her niece execute a flawless curtsy, saw the Duke bow with courteous but distant politeness, observed the brief exchange of pleasantries before another young lady claimed his attention. The ballet continued for nearly an hour, with the Duke displaying remarkable patience as he was introduced to what seemed like every unmarried woman in London. He danced twice, once with Lady Sinclair's daughter, once with the daughter of an earl, and spent the remainder of his time in conversation with older gentlemen, clearly preferring political discussion to flirtation. Marian was making her way toward the retiring room when catastrophe struck. A young woman, laughing over her shoulder at something her companion said, stepped backward directly into Marian's path. The collision was inevitable. Marian stumbled, her worn slipper catching on the hem of her gown, and fell forward with enough momentum to careen into a footman carrying a tray of champagne glasses. The crash echoed across the ballroom like a thunderclap. Crystal shattered against marble, champagne sprayed in a golden arc, and Marian found herself sprawled on the floor in a puddle of wine and broken glass, her ancient dress now soaked and her dignity in similar ruins. The music stopped. Conversations ceased. Into the terrible silence, Arabella's voice rang out with horrified clarity. "Oh, for heaven's sake, she is not with us. I have never seen that woman before in my life." The denial burned worse than any physical injury. Marian remained on the floor, her hands cut from the broken glass, her face burning with humiliation, while dozens of eyes stared with varying degrees of pity and amusement. A servant rushed forward with a cloth, but Marian waved him away. Determined to extract herself without creating further spectacle, a hand appeared in her line of vision, palm up, steady and expectant. Marian followed the hand to its owner and found herself looking up into the face of the Duke of Harrington. He stood over her, his expression grave but not unkind, his offered assistance brooking no refusal. "Allow me," he said quietly. His voice was deeper than she had expected, with a quality she could not quite name, something genuine beneath the formal courtesy. Marian placed her hand in his, feeling the strength of his grip as he drew her effortlessly to her feet. Her legs trembled beneath her, whether from shock or shame she could not say. The Duke's other hand moved to steady her elbow, his touch firm but gentle. "Are you injured?" he asked, noting the blood beginning to seep through her glove. "I am quite well, Your Grace," Marian managed, though her voice shook. "Merely clumsy. I apologize for the disruption." His eyes, she noticed, were grey flecked with blue, and they regarded her with something approaching concern. "The fault lies not with you. The lady who stepped backward should have been more aware of her surroundings." He spoke clearly, his words carrying to the curious onlookers. "Allow me to escort you somewhere more private, where your injuries can be properly attended." Before Marian could protest, he had tucked her hand through his arm and was guiding her through the crowd with the ease of someone accustomed to command. People parted before them like the Red Sea before Moses, their faces registering varying degrees of shock at the sight of the Duke of Harrington escorting the woman who had just provided the evening's entertainment. He led her to a small withdrawing room off the main corridor, furnished with delicate chairs and a settee. A servant materialized with medical supplies before Marian could wonder how they had arrived so quickly. The Duke dismissed the man with a brief word, then turned his attention to Marian's hands. "Your Grace, this is hardly necessary," Marian protested. "I am perfectly capable of tending my own injuries. You should return to the ball." "Your absence will be noted." "Let it be noted," he replied, already removing her ruined gloves with careful precision. "I have little interest in returning to a gathering where guests are so readily abandoned by their own families." The rebuke was gentle but unmistakable. Marian felt fresh heat rise to her cheeks. "My niece was merely startled. She did not mean—" "Your niece," the Duke interrupted, displayed a shocking lack of character, as did everyone else who stood gawking rather than offering assistance. He examined her palms, noting the several cuts marring her skin. "These will need cleaning." The glass was filthy. He worked with surprising competence, cleaning the wounds with careful attention before applying basilicum powder and wrapping her hands in clean linen. His touch was gentle, his manner focused, as though the task required his complete concentration. Marian found herself studying his face, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar near his left temple, the way his brow furrowed slightly as he worked. "You have done this before," she observed. A slight smile curved his mouth. "I have spent considerable time on my estates. One learns to tend injuries when the nearest physician is an hour away. My steward fell from a horse last spring and dislocated his shoulder. I managed the reduction myself." How resourceful. Marian was surprised to find herself relaxing despite the bizarre circumstances. There was something inherently calming about the Duke's presence, a quality of steadiness that invited trust. "Necessity rather than virtue," he replied, securing the final bandage. He sat back, examining his work with satisfaction before meeting her eyes. "There. You should heal cleanly, though I recommend avoiding champagne trays for the immediate future." The unexpected humor startled a laugh from Marian, quickly suppressed. "I shall endeavor to give all beverages a wide berth, Your Grace." "William," he said suddenly, "when we are private, I prefer William." Marian blinked, uncertain how to respond to such familiarity from a man she had met mere minutes ago. "That would be most improper, Your Grace. Most things worth doing are—" He studied her with those disconcerting grey eyes. "You have not told me your name." "Marian Pemberton." "Miss Pemberton, then." He rose, offering his hand to help her stand. "May I return you to your family, or would you prefer to remain here until the gossips find fresh meat to devour?" The thought of facing Arabella and Catherine filled Marion with dread, but remaining hidden seemed cowardly. "I should return. They will be concerned." Something flickered in the Duke's expression, doubt, perhaps, or knowing disbelief, but he merely inclined his head. "As you wish. However, I would ask one favour before we return to the fray." "Your Grace?" "Grant me the honour of the supper dance." Marion stared at him, convinced she had misheard. "I beg your pardon." "The supper dance," he repeated patiently. "I should like to partner you if you are willing." "Your Grace, that is, surely you must realize—" Marion gestured helplessly at her ruined gown, her bandaged hands, the general catastrophe of her appearance. "I am hardly fit to be seen, much less to dance with the Duke." "You appear perfectly acceptable to me," William replied with infuriating calm. "A bit damp, perhaps, but nothing that renders you incapable of basic movement. Unless your injuries prevent dancing, I should not wish to cause you pain. My hands are merely scratched, but then I see no impediment." He offered his arm once more. "Come. Let us give society something truly worthy of gossip." The return to the ballroom was every bit as excruciating as Marion had feared. Conversations halted mid-sentence as they entered. Eyes tracked their progress across the floor with the intensity of hounds sighting a fox. Catherine's face registered shock quickly masked by calculation, while Arabella looked as though she might swoon from mortification. True to his word, the Duke remained at Marion's side until the supper dance began. When the opening strains of a waltz filled the ballroom, he led her onto the floor with the same quiet confidence he had displayed throughout their acquaintance. Marion, who had not danced in years, found herself following his lead with surprising ease. "You dance well," he observed, as they turned in time to the music. "You sound surprised." "I am surprised by a great many things this evening." His hand at her waist was warm through the damp fabric of her gown, not least by the discovery that the most interesting person at this tedious affair was hiding among the chaperones. Marion glanced up sharply, searching for mockery in his expression. She found only genuine regard. "Your Grace, I fear you are mistaken. I am quite possibly the least interesting person in this room." "That is demonstrably false. You are certainly the most honest. How could you possibly know that? Your niece denied knowing you to save herself embarrassment. You could have done the same, claimed no relation, protected yourself from association with her callousness. Instead, you said nothing. You allowed her denial to stand unchallenged rather than create further scene." He paused, then added quietly, "That speaks to character far more eloquently than any profession of virtue." The observation struck Marion like a physical blow. She had thought no one noticed, that her silence had been merely another instance of her invisibility. To discover that this man, this Duke, had not only observed but understood, filled her with an emotion she could not name. "I'm accustomed to being overlooked," she said finally. It seemed easier to accept. Easier for whom? The question hung between them as they continued to dance. Around them, other couples swirled in elegant patterns, but Marion was aware only of the Duke's steady presence, his intelligent eyes, the way he seemed to truly see her when everyone else looked through her like glass. When the music ended, propriety demanded he escort her to supper, an obligation he fulfilled without apparent reluctance. They found themselves seated at a small table somewhat removed from the main gathering. Whether by accident or design, Marion could not determine. The Duke procured plates of delicacies, ensuring she had everything she required before attending to his own needs. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Pemberton," he said once they were settled. "I find myself curious about the woman my fellow guests so thoroughly failed to notice. There is little to tell, Your Grace. I am unremarkable in every particular." "I doubt that sincerely. Where did you learn to dance so well?" "My mother taught me when I was young. She loved dancing." The memory brought both pleasure and pain. "She died when I was 16. "I am sorry for your loss." The sympathy in his voice seemed genuine. "And your father?" "Gone these 5 years. He left his estate to my brother Thomas, who has been generous enough to provide me a home." "Has he?" The Duke's tone suggested he had formed his own opinions on Thomas Pemberton's generosity. "And you occupy yourself with—" "Whatever is required. I help with the children's education, accompany my sister-in-law on calls, manage the household accounts when requested." Marion heard the defensive note creeping into her voice and forced herself to moderate it. "I make myself useful." "Useful?" William repeated the word as though testing its flavour. What a thoroughly insufficient word for a human being. Marian met his gaze directly. It is the word most applicable to my circumstances, Your Grace. I am neither wife nor servant, neither family nor stranger. Usefulness is the price of my keep. And if you could be more than useful, what would you choose? The question was so unexpected, so genuinely curious, that Marian found herself answering honestly. I would have a cottage somewhere quiet, nothing grand, just a small place with a garden and enough books to last a lifetime. I would wake each morning knowing the day was mine to spend as I wished, answerable to no one. That sounds remarkably pleasant, William said. Though lonely, perhaps. Loneliness is relative, Your Grace. One can be lonely in a house full of people. Indeed, I find solitude preferable to company that makes one feel invisible. His expression shifted, something like recognition passing across his features. You speak from experience. I speak from 15 years of experience, Marian confirmed. But I should not complain. Many women have far less than I do. Having less than nothing is hardly a compelling recommendation for one's circumstances. William leaned forward slightly. Miss Pemberton, I hope you will not think me forward, but I find myself wanting to know you better. Might I call upon you? Marian's heart stuttered. Your Grace, that would be most inappropriate. I am hardly— You are hardly what? Worthy of acquaintance. Too far beneath my notice. His voice remained gentle, but steel undergirded the words. I am capable of determining for myself whose company I find valuable. I am asking whether you would welcome my call, not whether society would approve it. They would not approve, Marian felt compelled to point out. Your interest in me will cause speculation, perhaps even scandal. Let them speculate. I have weathered worse than wagging tongues. He paused, studying her face. You have not answered my question. Marian searched within herself for the truth. Did she want to see this man again? This duke who bandaged her hands and asked about her dreams, who looked at her as though she mattered. The answer frightened her with its intensity. Yes, she whispered. I would welcome your call. His smile transformed his face, revealing a warmth that had been hidden beneath his formal manner. Then I shall present myself at your brother's house tomorrow afternoon, if that is convenient. Tomorrow? Marian's voice rose slightly. So soon? I see little point in delay when one has found something worth pursuing. The return journey to her brother's house was accomplished in tense silence. Catherine sat rigid with barely suppressed fury, while Arabella radiated wounded pride. Thomas, who had witnessed the evening's events with typical oblivious contentment, seemed puzzled by the charged atmosphere. Extraordinary thing, the Duke dancing with Marian as he ventured. Very civil of him after your tumble. Decent fellow, Harrington. We discussed agricultural reform for half an hour. Remarkably well informed on crop rotation. The Duke, Catherine said with icy precision, made Arabella a laughingstock. Everyone saw him ignore her to dance with her spinster aunt. It was mortifying. I hardly think, Thomas began, but his wife cut him off. You never think, Thomas. That is the difficulty. Catherine turned her glare on Marian. I hope you are satisfied with this evening's work. You have ruined your niece's prospects for the entire season. Catherine, that is hardly fair, Thomas protested weakly. Marian did not choose to fall. She chose to accept the Duke's attention. She could have demurred, made excuses, done something to deflect his misguided charity. Instead, she paraded about the ballroom like— Catherine struggled for words adequate to her outrage. Like what, Catherine? Marian asked quietly. She was exhausted. Her hands throbbed, and something inside her had crystallized into rebellion. Like someone worthy of basic courtesy, like a human being rather than a piece of furniture. The carriage fell silent. Thomas looked shocked, while Catherine's face mottled with anger. Arabella stared at Marian as though she had sprouted a second head. How dare you speak to me in such manner? Catherine hissed. After all we have done for you, providing you shelter and in exchange I have served as unpaid governess, secretary and companion for 15 years. Marian interrupted, her voice remaining level despite the trembling in her limbs. I have earned my keep, Catherine. I have earned the right to be treated with basic dignity, even by you. You forget yourself, Catherine snapped. Tomorrow you will apologize, and we will discuss your future with this family. Tomorrow, Marian replied. The Duke of Harrington will be calling upon me. I suggest you prepare for that eventuality rather than planning my exile." The statement landed like a grenade. Even Thomas appeared stunned. Catherine opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. Finally, she managed, "The Duke is calling." "Here?" "He requested permission, which I granted." Arabella found her voice. "You cannot possibly believe he intends anything serious. He was merely being kind after your accident. Tomorrow he will send a note with some excuse, and that will be the end of it." "Perhaps," Marian agreed, "but perhaps not. Either way, I intend to receive him with courtesy if he comes." The remainder of the journey passed in hostile silence. When they arrived home, Marian went directly to her small room in the attic, the chamber that had been hers since her arrival 15 years prior. It was sparsely furnished: a narrow bed, a washstand, a single chair, a trunk containing her meager possessions. She had long ago stopped noticing how the roof sloped uncomfortably low, or how cold the room became in winter. She sat on the bed, still wearing her ruined gown, and examined her bandaged hands. The Duke of Harrington had wrapped them. The Duke of Harrington had asked to call on her. The Duke of Harrington had looked at her as though she was someone worth knowing. It was impossible. It was absurd. It was too wonderful to believe and too dangerous to trust. Marian did not sleep that night. Instead, she sat by the window watching the stars wheel overhead and trying to understand what had happened in the space of a few hours to shift the foundations of her carefully constructed resignation. Morning arrived with grey skies threatening rain. Marian woke from the brief doze she had finally achieved to find a housemaid standing over her, eyes wide with barely suppressed excitement. "Begging your pardon, Miss Marian, but Mrs. Pemberton says you're to come down directly. The Duke's man has delivered a message." Marian's heart sank. The excuse Arabella had predicted, the polite withdrawal. She dressed with numb fingers, choosing her least shabby morning dress, and descended to the breakfast room where the family had gathered with unusual unanimity. Catherine held a cream-coloured card, her expression oscillating between triumph and confusion. "The Duke," she announced without preamble, "will call at 3 o'clock this afternoon. He has requested an audience with you specifically, Marian, though he has graciously extended greetings to the entire family." "How extraordinary," Thomas remarked through a mouthful of toast. "Quite an honour, really. We must have cook prepare something special." "We must do more than that," Catherine corrected sharply, her calculating gaze fixed on Marian. You will wear your grey silk. Your hair must be properly dressed. Arabella will lend you her pearl earbobs. When the Duke arrives, you will comport yourself with the utmost propriety and defer to Arabella at every opportunity." "I beg your pardon," Marian said carefully. "It is obvious the Duke's interest stems from sympathy after your accident. He is a gentleman performing what he perceives as his duty. However, once here, he will naturally notice Arabella's superior qualities. You will facilitate this by ensuring she is prominently featured in all conversation." The command was so breathtakingly presumptuous that Marian almost laughed. "Catherine, I hardly think—" "It is not your place to think," Catherine interrupted. "It is your place to obey. This family has sheltered and fed you for 15 years. The least you can do is show gratitude by assisting your niece in securing the most advantageous match available." Marian looked at her brother, waiting for him to intervene, to defend her, to assert some basic fairness. Thomas studiously examined his eggs. Arabella smirked. Louisa watched with wide eyes but remained silent. "No," Marian said quietly. Catherine's head snapped up. "I beg your pardon." "No," Marian repeated, louder this time. "The Duke asked to call on me. If he wishes to pay attention to Arabella, that is his prerogative. I will not scheme to manipulate his interest." "You ungrateful—" "I am many things, Catherine, but ungrateful is not among them. I have paid for my place in this house with years of service. The Duke's visit is my concern, not yours." The confrontation hung suspended for one crystalline moment before Catherine rose from the table with trembling dignity. "Very well. Conduct yourself as you see fit, but when the Duke's interest proves as ephemeral as morning dew, do not expect sympathy from this quarter." She swept from the room, Arabella following with a wounded sniff. Louisa hesitated, looking between her departing mother and Marian, with something approaching respect before following her sister. Thomas finally raised his eyes from his plate. "That was unwise," Marian. Catherine will make you pay for that defiance. She has been making me pay for breathing for 15 years, Thomas. At least now I shall have earned her ire honestly. Her brother sighed, looking older than his 40 years. I wish you would not antagonize her. It makes life difficult for all of us. I wish, Marian replied, rising from the table, that once in 15 years you had defended me. But we rarely get what we wish for, do we? She left him sitting alone with his eggs and his guilty conscience. The hours until 3 o'clock crawled past with excruciating slowness. Marian spent the morning in her room, ostensibly resting her injured hands but actually attempting to calm her rioting nerves. What did one discuss with a duke? What if conversation flagged? What if he found her as tedious as everyone else did? At 2:30, she could no longer bear the isolation. She descended to the drawing room to find it transformed. Catherine had ordered every surface polished to brilliance, arranged fresh flowers on every available table, and positioned the chairs to maximum advantage. Arabella sat in the place of honor nearest the fire, wearing her finest afternoon dress and an expression of determined charm. Aunt Marian, she greeted with poisonous sweetness, how good of you to join us. I do hope your hands have recovered from last night's mishap. It would be dreadful if you could not properly serve tea. The implication was clear. Marian was to play servant to Arabella's lady. Before she could respond, the mantel clock struck 3, and moments later, the butler announced, His Grace, the Duke of Harrington. William entered the drawing room with the same quiet confidence Marian remembered from the previous evening. He was dressed for paying calls, his attire impeccable without being ostentatious. His eyes swept the assembled family before settling on Marian with unmistakable warmth. Miss Pemberton. He bowed over her hand, careful of her bandages. How delightful to see you again. I trust you are recovering well. Quite well, Your Grace. Thank you for your continued concern. Your Grace, Catherine interposed herself between them with practiced skill. How gracious of you to call. May I present my daughter, Miss Arabella Pemberton? I believe you were briefly introduced last evening before that unfortunate incident. William turned his attention to Arabella with courteous interest. Miss Arabella, a pleasure. Arabella executed a perfect curtsy, her smile dazzling. The pleasure is entirely mine, Your Grace. We are all so grateful for your kindness to Aunt Marian last evening. It was quite heroic of you to assist her after her clumsy tumble. I found nothing clumsy in the incident, William replied mildly. Accidents occur, particularly when people are careless of others' presence. The fault lay entirely with the lady who stepped backward without looking. The gentle rebuke hung in the air. Catherine rushed to fill the awkward silence. Do sit, Your Grace. Marian. Pour tea for His Grace. Your Grace, how do you take your tea? I would be honoured if Miss Pemberton would join me, William said, gesturing to the settee. I have questions about the book I noticed her reading last evening. Marian, who had been reading nothing the previous evening, understood the diplomatic fiction for what it was, a means of securing private conversation. She settled onto the settee, acutely aware of Catherine's disapproving glare. You have excellent powers of observation, Your Grace, she said as she prepared his tea. I confess I do not recall which book you might have seen. It appeared to be a volume of Wordsworth, William replied smoothly. I am partial to his work myself. Do you enjoy the romantic poets, Miss Pemberton? Very much, though I find Byron somewhat overwrought for my taste. A woman of sense. Byron's dramatic excess becomes tiresome after prolonged exposure. His eyes glinted with amusement, though I suspect admitting such an opinion is unfashionable. Fashion has never been my strength, Marian admitted. Then we have yet another trait in common. The conversation flowed with surprising ease. William proved knowledgeable about literature, music, and a dozen other topics rarely discussed in mixed company. He solicited Marian's opinions and listened to her responses with genuine attention. When Arabella attempted to interject comments about poets she had clearly never read, William acknowledged her politely before returning his focus to Marian. Catherine's frustration became palpable. She tried repeatedly to redirect the conversation, to highlight Arabella's accomplishments, to remind the Duke of her daughter's superior claims to his attention. William remained unfailingly courteous but unmoved. Finally, after an hour that seemed to pass in minutes, William rose to take his leave. Thank you for the delightful afternoon, Mrs. Pemberton, Miss Arabella. He turned to Marian. his expression warming. "Miss Pemberton, I wonder if you might be interested in viewing the botanical exhibition at the Horticultural Society next week. They are featuring specimens from the Orient, which I recall you mentioning an interest in yesterday." Marian had mentioned no such thing, but she understood the invitation for what it was, a public declaration of continued interest. "I should like that very much, Your Grace." "Excellent. I shall send word regarding the particulars." He bowed over her hand once more, his thumb brushing the edge of her bandage in a gesture that felt almost like a caress. "Until then, Miss Pemberton." The moment the door closed behind him, Catherine erupted. "How dare you monopolize his attention? You were meant to facilitate conversation with Arabella, not engage in your own displays of learning." "The Duke sought my company specifically," Marian replied with uncharacteristic firmness. "I would have been rude to redirect his attention elsewhere." "Rude? You speak to me of rudeness when you have just sabotaged your niece's prospects. I have done nothing of the sort. If the Duke wished to converse with Arabella, nothing prevented him." "He could not ignore you without appearing discourteous," Arabella cried, tears of frustration bright in her eyes. "You trapped him with your presence." Thomas, who had observed the visit from the corner chair, finally intervened. "Come now, this is unreasonable. The Duke made his preferences quite clear. We should respect them." "You would say that," Catherine snapped. "You have always been too lenient with your sister. Well, I will not stand idly by while she ruins Arabella's future. Marian, you will decline the Duke's invitation." "I will not." "You forget yourself. You live in this house by our sufferance. You will obey my directives, or find yourself seeking alternative arrangements." The threat hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. Marian felt her hard-won composure begin to crack. Where would she go? She had no money, no prospects, no skills beyond those of a genteel companion. Catherine held all the power, and both women knew it. Into the taut silence, Thomas spoke with uncharacteristic firmness. "Catherine, you go too far. Marian is my sister. She will not be cast out because a duke finds her company pleasant." Catherine turned on him with fury. "You spineless fool! Can you not see what is happening? The Duke is amusing himself with your aged sister, while every eligible girl in London throws herself at his feet. When he tires of his little experiment, Marian will be revealed as a laughing-stock, and Arabella's reputation will be tarnished by association. Then perhaps Arabella should focus on attracting gentlemen more suited to her age and temperament," Thomas replied. "The Duke of Harrington is clearly not interested in simpering girls. Marian seems to suit him admirably." "Suit him?" Catherine's voice climbed to a near shriek. "You cannot possibly believe he intends anything serious. He is a duke, Thomas. Men of his rank do not marry impoverished spinsters of 35. "I am 35, Marian corrected quietly. "And I have no expectations of marriage, Catherine. The Duke has offered friendship, which I am pleased to accept. Nothing more." But even as she spoke the words, a traitorous part of Marian's heart whispered that perhaps, impossibly, there might be more. The way William had looked at her, the warmth in his voice, the careful attention to her comfort, these suggested feelings beyond mere friendship. She crushed the hope ruthlessly. Catherine was right about one thing. Dukes did not marry women like Marian Pemberton. The week preceding the botanical exhibition passed in an atmosphere of cold hostility. Catherine spoke to Marian only when absolutely necessary, her tone frigid with disapproval. Arabella maintained wounded silence, punctuated by occasional dramatic sighs. Even the servants seemed uncomfortable, caught between their mistress's obvious anger and their curiosity about Marian's unlikely courtship. Only Louisa proved an ally. The younger girl sought Marian out in her attic room the night before the planned outing. "Aunt Marian, may I speak with you?" "Of course, Louisa. Come in." Marian moved her mending aside, making room on the narrow bed. Louisa settled beside her, worrying her lower lip. "I wanted to say I think Mamma is being beastly. The Duke is clearly fond of you. I cannot see why that should be cause for outrage." "Your mother wants the best for Arabella," Marian said carefully. "She sees the Duke as a prize that should go to someone young and beautiful. But he chose you," Louisa pointed out with adolescent directness. "Does not his choice matter?" "It should," Marian agreed. "But society rarely values personal preference over what is deemed appropriate." "That seems terribly unfair." Louisa was quiet for a moment, then asked shyly, "Do you love him, Aunt Marion?" The question pierced Marion like a blade. Did she love William? They had met only twice and conversed for a few hours total. Love required time to develop, shared experiences, mutual understanding. And yet there was something about him, his kindness, his intelligence, the way he made her feel seen after years of invisibility, that had already burrowed into her heart. "I hardly know him well enough for love," Marion replied, evading the question. "But you could," Louisa persisted. "If given the chance, you could love him." "Perhaps. But love alone is insufficient foundation for a life together, particularly when the parties involved are so unequal in station. Pride and Prejudice suggests otherwise." Marion smiled despite herself. "You have been reading Miss Austen." "Constantly. She writes about women who marry for love despite societal obstacles. Why should your story be different?" "Because Miss Austen writes fiction, darling. Reality is considerably less romantic." But the next afternoon, as Marion dressed for the botanical exhibition, she allowed herself a moment of fantasy. What if William's attentions were serious? What if, impossible as it seemed, he saw in her qualities that might make a suitable duchess? What if Catherine was wrong? She chose her blue muslin, the least shabby of her gowns, and pinned her mother's cameo at her throat. Her hair refused to cooperate, the dark strands escaping their pins to curl rebelliously around her face. After the third attempt at achieving elegance, she surrendered to dishevelment. "You look lovely," Louisa declared, appearing in the doorway. "The Duke will not be able to take his eyes from you." "The Duke will likely be looking at orchids, not at me," Marion replied, but she smiled gratefully. William arrived precisely at the appointed hour, driving a curricle himself rather than sending a carriage. Catherine intercepted him in the entry hall, Arabella positioned strategically at her side. "Your Grace, surely you intended to invite Arabella as well. She is so fond of botanical specimens." "I have never expressed interest in plants," Arabella murmured to Louisa, who suppressed a giggle. "I intended a private outing," William replied with diplomatic firmness. "Another time, perhaps, Miss Arabella." He handed Marion into the curricle with careful attention to her still healing hands, then took his seat beside her. As they pulled away from the house, Marion glanced back to see Catherine's face tight with fury and Arabella's with disappointment. "Your sister-in-law appears displeased," William observed. "She had hoped you would transfer your attentions to Arabella." "Did she?" He sounded genuinely puzzled. "I cannot imagine why. Your niece is charming enough, but she possesses all the depth of a teacup. Conversation with her would exhaust me within a quarter hour." "She is very young," Marion felt compelled to defend her niece, "and has been raised to believe beauty is a woman's primary asset. Then she has been poorly educated. Beauty fades, Miss Pemberton. Character endures." He guided the horses expertly through London traffic. "I find character far more compelling than mere aesthetics." The Horticultural Society's exhibition was housed in a grand conservatory, its glass walls reflecting the pale autumn sunlight. Inside, exotic plants from around the world created a lush jungle that smelled of earth and growing things. William proved remarkably knowledgeable about botanical matters, explaining the properties of various specimens with enthusiasm. "My estate in Derbyshire has extensive gardens," he told her as they examined a particularly striking orchid. "My mother designed them. After she died, I maintained them as she would have wished." "That is a beautiful tribute," Marion said softly. "You must have loved her very much." "She was the finest person I have ever known," William replied. "Kind, intelligent, possessed of absolute integrity. My father did not deserve her, but she honored their union with grace despite his many failings." "Your father was a philanderer and a wastrel who squandered much of the family fortune on mistresses and gaming." William's voice remained level, but pain flickered in his eyes. "My mother endured his infidelities with dignity until the day she died. I vowed then that I would never become him, never cause a woman such pain." The confession was startling in its honesty. Marion touched his arm gently. "That you recognize his faults and consciously choose a different path speaks well of your character." "Does it? Sometimes I wonder if I have overcorrected. I kept myself apart from society, from relationships, for fear of causing harm." "It has been a lonely existence." "Loneliness is preferable to cruelty," Marion observed. "Is it, though?" William turned to face her fully. Or is it simply a different form of surrender? They stood among the orchids, surrounded by exotic beauty, and Marian felt the moment shift into something profound. William was offering her something, a glimpse into his guarded heart, a vulnerability that cost him dearly to reveal. "I think," she said carefully, "that there is courage in choosing connection despite fear. The risk of pain is the price of genuine intimacy." Spoken like someone who has also known loneliness. "I have known little else for the past 15 years. William's hand moved to cover hers where it rested on his arm. "Then perhaps we might ease each other's solitude." The words were gentle, almost casual, but Marian heard the weight behind them. This was courtship, she realized with dawning wonder. Careful, respectful courtship from a man who valued her thoughts and sought her company. It was so different from the frenzied social maneuvering she had observed in Arabella's pursuit of eligible men that she almost failed to recognize it. "I would like that very much," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They continued through the exhibition, but the botanical specimens became mere background to their conversation. William spoke of his estates, his responsibilities, his frustrations with Parliament's glacial pace of reform. Marian found herself sharing thoughts she had never voiced to anyone. Her love of learning thwarted by lack of access to advanced education. Her desire for purpose beyond usefulness. Her fear that life was passing while she remained frozen in perpetual waiting. "You need not wait any longer," William said as they paused near a collection of ferns. "If you wished, you could have independence, purpose, a life of your own choosing." "How? I have no fortune, no prospects for earning one." "You could marry." The statement hung between them, heavy with implication. Marian's heart began a painful rhythm against her ribs. "Your Grace?" "William," he corrected. "Please, when we are alone, call me William." "William, then." The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate and forbidden. "You cannot mean to suggest what I think you are suggesting. Can I not?" He turned to face her fully, his grey eyes intent. "Marian, I am 32 years old. For the past decade, I have been pressed to marry by family, by society, by the weight of duty and expectation. I have refused because I would not repeat my father's mistake of marrying for advantage rather than regard." "But I am hardly an advantageous match," Marian protested. "I bring you nothing, no fortune, no connections, no beauty to grace your table." "You bring yourself," he replied simply. "Your intelligence, your honesty, your kindness, your strength. Those are the qualities I value, Marian. Those are the things that make a marriage bearable rather than an endurance." "You speak of marriage as though it were inevitable between us," Marian said, her voice shaking. "We have known each other mere days. Days can be enough when one recognizes what one has been seeking." William took her hand, careful of her healing cuts. "I am not proposing immediately, Marian. I am asking permission to court you properly, to give us both time to determine whether this regard we feel might deepen into something permanent." "Society will mock you," she warned. "They will say you have taken leave of your senses. Let them say what they wish. I learned long ago that society's approval is a poor foundation for happiness." Marian searched his face, looking for signs of deception or momentary fancy. She found only sincerity and a hope that mirrored her own. "Very well," she said finally. "You may court me, William, though I suspect we are both quite mad." His smile transformed his features, revealing joy that had been carefully hidden. "Then we shall be mad together." News of the Duke's courtship spread through London society with the speed of wildfire. Within days, every drawing room in Mayfair buzzed with speculation about the improbable match. The reactions ranged from disbelief to outright mockery. "The Duke has clearly suffered some mental affliction," pronounced Lady Weatherby at her weekly card party. "To pursue a woman of Miss Pemberton's age and circumstances defies all reason." "Perhaps he values qualities beyond youth and fortune," suggested Mrs. Hartwell, one of the few voices of support in the sea of censure. "Miss Pemberton is known to be a woman of excellent character." "Character," Lady Weatherby sniffed. "Character does not produce heirs, Mrs. Hartwell. The Duke requires a young, fertile wife capable of securing the succession. Miss Pemberton is 35 if she is a day. The whole affair is most irregular." The gossip reached Marian through various channels, each report more cutting than the last. She bore it with outward composure, but privately, each whispered criticism felt like a small death. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps William's interest would fade once he recognized the absurdity of his choice. But William, it seemed, was immune to society's opinions. He called on Marian 3 times a week, took her driving in the park, escorted her to the theatre, and made no secret of his preference for her company. His attentiveness only intensified the speculation and, among some quarters, the hostility. The cut direct came from Lady Ashworth at a musical 3 weeks into their courtship. Marian had accompanied the Pemberton family to the event, hoping to demonstrate that she was not some grasping adventuress, but merely a woman accepting the respectful attentions of a gentleman. Lady Ashworth, a distant connection of William's, made her feelings abundantly clear by turning her back when Marian attempted a greeting. "Impertinent creature," Lady Ashworth said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Some women have no sense of their proper place." The insult burned, but Marian kept her head high and moved past without acknowledging it. She found a seat near the back of the room, willing herself invisible as the musicians prepared to perform. "Miss Pemberton." William appeared at her side, his expression thunderous. "I have just learned of Lady Ashworth's unconscionable behaviour." "It is of no consequence," Marian said quietly. "She merely expressed what many are thinking. Then many are fools." William sat beside her with deliberate care, his proximity a public declaration of continued support. "I will not tolerate such treatment of you, Marian. Lady Ashworth will receive a visit from me expressing my profound displeasure. Please, do not make matters worse. Your defense of me only fuels speculation that I have somehow bewitched you. Let them speculate." He took her hand, scandalously uncaring of the audience. "I will not pretend indifference to protect the sensibilities of people whose opinions I do not value." His loyalty moved her beyond words. In that moment, surrounded by hostile whispers and curious stares, Marian felt something shift inside her heart. This was not infatuation or gratitude for his kindness. This was love, terrifying and absolute, for a man whose regard might yet prove her undoing. The musicale proceeded, but Marian heard nothing of the performance. She was aware only of William beside her, his hand still clasping hers, his presence a bulwark against the sea of disapproval. When they departed, he handed her into his carriage with tender care. "I am sorry you were subjected to such treatment," he said once they were private. "You deserve better." "I knew what I risked in accepting your attentions," Marian replied. "Society does not easily forgive those who violate its expectations. Society may go hang." William's vehemence surprised her. "I will not apologize for choosing a woman of substance over an empty-headed girl whose sole recommendation is youth and a pretty face. But your family, my family will accept my choice or reconcile themselves to disappointment." He paused, then added more gently, "Marian, I must ask you something of great importance." Her heart stuttered. "Yes." "Are you courting me from genuine affection, or from fear of your circumstances? I would not have you feel obligated to accept my suit merely because it offers escape from an unhappy situation." The question revealed the depth of his consideration for her. He was offering her an exit, a chance to withdraw without shame if her feelings were false. The generosity of it overwhelmed her. "When I first met you," Marian said slowly, choosing her words with care, "I was grateful for your kindness. Gratitude became appreciation as I came to know your character. Appreciation has deepened into something I hesitate to name, for fear of presuming too much." "Name it," William urged softly. "Please." "Love," she whispered. "I have come to love you, William, though I know it is foolish and dangerous and likely to end in heartbreak." He was silent for so long that Marian feared she had erred catastrophically. Then he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. "Not foolish," he said against her skin, "not dangerous. And I swear on my life, Marian, it will not end in heartbreak, not if I can prevent it. You cannot control society's censure or the obstacles we face. No, but I can control my own constancy." He met her eyes, his expression solemn. "I love you, Marian Pemberton. I have loved you since you stood in that ballroom covered in champagne and looked at me without calculation or guile. I will continue to love you regardless of what the gossips say or how difficult the path ahead may prove." The declaration should have filled her with joy. Instead, Marian felt fear clutch at her heart. "And when you tire of fighting for me, when the constant battle against society's disapproval becomes exhausting. What then, William? Then we shall rest together and gather strength for the next engagement. He cupped her face with one hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. I am not so weak as to surrender at the first sign of opposition, Marian. If you will have me, I will stand beside you against whatever storms may come. If I will have you, Marian managed a shaky laugh. You are a duke, William. I am nobody. You are everything, he corrected. And I am asking, formally and with full understanding of the implications, whether you will consent to become my wife. The world seemed to hold its breath. Through the carriage window, Marian could see London passing by, the grand houses, the gas lamps beginning to flicker to life, the fashionable people hurrying to their evening engagements. It was a world that had never welcomed her, never valued her, never seen her as anything more than an inconvenient spinster. But William saw her differently. William saw her truly. Yes, she said, the word both surrender and victory. Yes, I will marry you. His kiss was gentle, reverent, and utterly perfect. When they parted, Marian found herself laughing with a joy she had thought forever beyond her reach. We shall have to tell your family, William said, practical even in the midst of emotion. I should formally request your brother's permission. Thomas will grant it eagerly, Marian predicted. Catherine will have an apoplexy. I find I am surprisingly unconcerned with Catherine's medical episodes, William smiled. When shall we make the announcement? Soon, I suppose. There is little point in delay. Marian hesitated, then voiced the fear that had been gnawing at her. William, are you certain? Once we announce our engagement, withdrawing will cause tremendous scandal. You would be forever branded as having jilted me. Your reputation would suffer. My reputation can withstand considerably more damage than a broken engagement, he replied. But I have no intention of jilting you, Marian. I am entirely certain of my choice. The announcement came the following week at a dinner party hosted by William's aunt, the Dowager Duchess of Harrington. The old woman had proven an unexpected ally, declaring that William deserved happiness more than he deserved a politically advantageous match. Besides, she had told Marian during their first meeting, I have met your niece, Arabella. If she represents the alternatives, you are a vast improvement. The girl has the conversational skills of a potted plant. The dinner party was a glittering affair, attended by the cream of society. Marian wore her finest gown, a new creation in silver silk that William had insisted on commissioning. Over her strenuous objections, she felt like an impostor among the jewelled ladies and distinguished gentlemen. But William's presence at her side steadied her. The Dowager Duchess made the announcement herself, rising during the dessert course to tap her glass for attention. My friends, I have the privilege of sharing joyous news. My nephew, the Duke of Harrington, has done me the honour of requesting my blessing for his engagement to Miss Marian Pemberton, which I have gladly given. Please join me in congratulating the happy couple. The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable. Shocked faces turned toward Marian and William. Someone dropped a spoon. Lady Ashworth looked as though she might faint. Then, from the far end of the table, an elderly earl raised his glass. Harrington always did have excellent judgment. To the Duke and his bride. The toast was taken up gradually, though several guests merely raised their glasses without drinking, their disapproval evident. Marian felt the weight of their scrutiny and fought the urge to flee. William leaned close, his voice for her ears alone. Steady, my love. Let them stare. They will grow accustomed eventually. But growing accustomed proved more difficult than William anticipated. The formal announcement in the Times brought a deluge of responses ranging from tepid congratulations to outright hostility. Several of William's relations wrote demanding he reconsider. The betting books at White's carried wagers on whether the marriage would actually take place. Catherine's reaction was volcanic. She descended on Marian's room the morning after the announcement, her face mottled with rage. "You have ruined us!" she shrieked. "Absolutely ruined us! Arabella will never make an advantageous match now, not when her aunt is the subject of such ridicule. Catherine, I hardly think, you never think. That is your great failing, Marian. You accepted the Duke's attentions with no consideration for how it would affect this family." Catherine paced the small room like a caged animal. "Everyone is laughing at us. They say the Pembertons are social climbers who put forward their spinster aunt to trap a duke. No one who knows me could believe such a thing, Marion replied, though her stomach churned with anxiety. No one knows you, Marion. You are nothing, nobody. And now you have attached yourself to one of the most prominent men in England and dragged us all into the scandal. Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression troubled. Catherine, please moderate your tone. The servants— I care nothing for the servants. Catherine whirled on her husband. Your sister has made us a laughingstock, and you stand there wringing your hands like a useless fool. That is quite enough, Thomas said with rare firmness. Marion has accepted an honourable proposal from a respectable gentleman. There is no scandal in that. No scandal? Catherine laughed bitterly. Half of London believes she used witchcraft to ensnare him. The other half assumes she must be carrying his bastard. The accusation was so vile that Marion felt physically ill. How dare you suggest such a thing? I dare because I know you, Marion Pemberton. You are desperate, alone, and willing to do whatever necessary to escape your circumstances. Well, you may have secured your future, but you have destroyed Arabella's prospects in the process. If Arabella's prospects depend on my obscurity, then they were never substantial to begin with, Marion replied, her voice shaking. I am sorry you are distressed, Catherine, but I will not apologize for accepting happiness when it was offered to me. Catherine drew herself up with icy dignity. Then you leave me no choice. You are no longer welcome in this house. Pack your things and remove yourself immediately. Catherine, Thomas protested, you cannot simply cast out my sister. I can, and I will. She has made her choice. Let her live with the consequences. Marion looked at her brother, waiting for him to intervene more forcefully, to defend her as family should. Thomas opened his mouth, closed it, then turned away. The betrayal cut deeper than Catherine's venom. Very well, Marion said quietly. I shall collect my belongings and depart within the hour. She packed her few possessions with numb efficiency, folding her threadbare gowns and worn underthings into the battered trunk that had accompanied her to this house 15 years ago. Louisa appeared as she was finishing, tears streaming down the girl's face. Aunt Marion, please do not go. This is horrid and unfair. Marion embraced her niece, one of the few genuine sources of affection in this household. I must go, darling. Your mother has made her wishes clear, but where will you stay? What will you do? I shall send word to William. He will arrange something appropriate. Marion managed to smile despite her roiling emotions. Do not worry for me, Louisa. I shall be quite well. Will you still marry the Duke? If he will still have me after this scandal. He would be a fool not to, Louisa declared with passionate loyalty. You are worth a dozen Arabellas. The endorsement from her young niece sustained Marion as she descended the stairs for the final time, her trunk carried by a footman who avoided meeting her eyes. Catherine and Arabella watched from the drawing-room doorway, their faces reflecting satisfaction and wounded pride respectively. Thomas was nowhere to be seen. Marion climbed into the hired hackney with her head held high, refusing to let them see how deeply the rejection wounded her. Only when the vehicle pulled away did she allow tears to fall. She directed the driver to the Dowager Duchess's residence, having nowhere else to go. The old woman received her with brisk kindness, asking no questions beyond the essential facts before installing Marion in a comfortable guest room. Your sister-in-law is a harridan, the Dowager pronounced. You are well rid of her. She is protecting her daughter, Marion replied, unable to completely abandon fairness even now. She is indulging in hysterics. The Dowager fixed Marion with a penetrating stare. My nephew will be devastated when he learns of this. He called earlier, but has gone to his club. I shall send word for him to return immediately. William arrived within the hour, his face dark with fury when the Dowager explained the situation. He found Marion in the library, staring unseeing at a volume of poetry. This is unconscionable, he declared without preamble. How dare your family cast you out? They are within their rights, Marion replied dully. I have brought them unwanted attention. You have done nothing wrong. William knelt beside her chair, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. Marion, look at me. She raised her eyes reluctantly, finding his face filled with concern and determination. We shall marry immediately, he said. Tomorrow, if you wish. I will not leave you vulnerable to further abuse from your family or anyone else. William, we cannot marry in such haste. The scandal will be the same whether we marry tomorrow or next month. He cupped her face. forcing her to maintain eye contact. "I will not wait while society debates whether I am mad to want you. You are mine, Marion, and I am yours. Let us make it official and let the gossips choke on their speculation. Your family will object." "My family's objections are noted and disregarded. My aunt supports the match. The rest of my relations can reconcile themselves to reality or remove themselves from my life." His thumb brushed away a tear she had not realized had fallen. "Say yes, Marion. Let me protect you, as I should have done from the beginning." The temptation was overwhelming. To be married, to have the security of William's name and position, to never again fear being cast out or belittled. It was everything she had never dared hope for. "Yes," she whispered. "Let us marry soon." The wedding took place 1 week later in the private chapel at William's Derbyshire estate. The Dowager Duchess attended, along with a handful of William's closest friends. Marion's family received invitations, but did not respond. She tried not to let their absence wound her, but the pain lingered nonetheless. She wore a gown of cream silk, simple but elegant, with William's mother's pearls at her throat. As she walked down the short aisle to where William waited, she was struck by the unreality of the moment. Was this truly happening? Was she, Marion Pemberton, spinster and burden, about to become a duchess? William's expression as she approached answered the question. He looked at her as though she were precious beyond measure, as though her presence bestowed an honor he had not dared hope to receive. When the vicar asked if he took this woman as his wife, his "I do" rang with conviction that left no room for doubt. Marion's own vows caught in her throat, overwhelmed by the enormity of the promise she was making. But William squeezed her hand gently, and she found her voice. "I do." The kiss that sealed their union was brief and chaste, appropriate for the sacred setting, but in that moment of contact, Marion felt years of loneliness and shame begin to dissolve. She was no longer unwanted, no longer invisible. She was William's wife, and that simple fact changed everything. The wedding breakfast was an intimate affair, marked by the dowager's acerbic wit and the genuine warmth of William's few guests. Marion found herself laughing for the first time in weeks, the tension of recent days finally easing. As evening fell, the guests departed, and Marion faced the reality of her wedding night. She knew what was expected, had overheard enough whispered conversations among married ladies to understand the basics, but theoretical knowledge proved inadequate preparation for the reality of following William to the ducal chambers. "You are terrified," he observed, as they stood awkwardly in his bedroom, the massive four-poster bed dominating the space like an accusation. "Not terrified," Marion corrected, "merely anxious. I am hardly experienced in such matters." "Nor should you be." William approached slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wished. "Marion, we need not consummate the marriage tonight if you are uncomfortable. There is no urgency." "But the marriage must be consummated to be legal," she protested. "Eventually, yes, but not necessarily this very night." He took her hands, his touch reassuring. "I will not force intimacy upon you before you are ready." His consideration moved her deeply. "I am ready, William. Anxious, yes, but ready. I trust you." "Then we shall proceed slowly." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "Tell me if you wish to stop." What followed was simultaneously awkward and tender, painful and sweet. William was patient, attentive to her comfort, murmuring encouragement and reassurance. When it was over, Marion lay in his arms feeling irrevocably changed. She was truly married now, bound to this man in the most fundamental way possible. "Are you well?" William asked, his fingers trailing through her loosened hair. "Very well." Marion nestled closer to his warmth. "Though I suspect I shall be sore tomorrow." His laugh rumbled through his chest. "An unfortunate but temporary consequence. It becomes easier with practice." "Practice?" Marion raised her head to look at him. "How much practice?" "Considerable practice, I hope." He kissed her nose. "I have years of celibacy to compensate for, my dear." The teasing tone made her smile. "Then I suppose I must resign myself to extensive marital duties." "Such sacrifice," he murmured, pulling her closer. "However will you bear it?" They fell asleep entwined, and Marion woke in the night to find William watching her with an expression of such tenderness that her breath caught. "What is it?" she whispered. "I am merely marveling at my good fortune," he replied. I have you, Marion. After all the years of loneliness, I have you. And I have you. She touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. I still cannot quite believe it is real. It is very real. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. You are the Duchess of Harrington now. There is no going back. I do not wish to go back. Marion spoke with absolute certainty. Whatever challenges lie ahead, I would face them as your wife rather than return to my former life. Then we face them together. The challenges materialized sooner than either anticipated. Their return to London 2 weeks later brought renewed speculation and, in some quarters, outright hostility. Invitations that had flooded William's household before his marriage now arrived with considerably less frequency. Several hostesses made it clear that while the Duke was welcome, his peculiar choice of wife rendered him less desirable as a guest. They will come around, William insisted, after the third such snub. Society has a short memory for scandal, but Marion, more attuned to the nuances of social disapproval, was less certain. She noticed the way conversation stopped when she entered a room, the barely concealed sneers, the deliberate cuts from women who had once been civil if not warm. The most painful rejection came from an unexpected quarter. Louisa appeared at the ducal townhouse one afternoon, her face blotched from crying. Aunt Marion, that is your grace, I'm so sorry. I tried to convince them, but— Slow down, darling. Marion drew her niece into the drawing-room, settling her on the sofa. What has happened? Mamma has forbidden me from seeing you. She says your disgrace has tainted the family, and continued association will ruin my chances of a good marriage. Fresh tears spilled down Louisa's cheeks. I slipped out while she was calling on Lady Thornbury, but I cannot stay long. The news struck Marion like a physical blow. She had anticipated Catherine's continued hostility, but to turn her daughters against her seemed unnecessarily cruel. I understand, she managed. You must obey your mother, Louisa. But it is not fair. You have done nothing wrong. You married a duke, for heaven's sake. How is that disgraceful? Your mother believes I overstepped my position, Marion explained wearily, that I should have refused the Duke's attentions to preserve Arabella's prospects. Arabella is perfectly capable of finding her own husband, Louisa declared with adolescent certainty. She does not need you to sacrifice yourself for her benefit. Nevertheless, family loyalty demands. Family loyalty should work both ways, Louisa interrupted. You have been nothing but kind to all of us, and this is how Mamma repays you. It is horrid. William entered the drawing-room, pausing when he saw Louisa's distress. Miss Louisa, this is an unexpected pleasure. Louisa rose hastily, executing an awkward curtsy. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion. I merely wished to see my aunt. You are always welcome here, William said firmly. You need not ask permission or offer apologies. Consider our home yours whenever you wish to visit. But Mamma has forbidden— Your mother's dictates do not extend to my household. If you wish to see your aunt, you may do so freely. His tone brooked no argument. I shall have my secretary draft a formal invitation for you to call regularly, which you may present to your mother as social obligation rather than personal choice. She can hardly forbid you to accept an invitation from a duke without causing offense. The strategic thinking behind the offer made Marion love her husband even more. He was not merely defending her, he was actively working to preserve her connections to those family members who valued her. Louisa departed an hour later, fortified by tea and the promise of regular visits. After she left, Marion turned to William with gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you. You did not have to offer such generosity to my family after their treatment of you. I did it for you, not for them, William replied. You love Louisa. I will not allow petty spite to sever that bond. Catherine will be furious. Catherine can choke on her fury for all I care. He pulled Marion into his arms, resting his chin atop her head. I will not let them hurt you any more, my love. Not while I have breath to prevent it. But preventing hurt proved more difficult than William anticipated. Society's disapproval manifested in countless small cruelties. The hostess who seated Marion at the far end of the table during a dinner party, the lady who requested Marion's absence from a charity committee, the whispered comments just loud enough to be overheard. Through it all, Marion maintained her dignity with an effort that exhausted her. She accompanied William to social events with her head held high. smiled graciously at those who sneered, and pretended indifference to the constant scrutiny. But privately, the weight of society's judgment was crushing her. It came to a head at Lady Westmoreland's ball, 6 weeks after their marriage. Marian had tried to beg off attending, pleading a headache, but William insisted they maintain appearances. "We cannot let them drive us into hiding," he argued, and that would be admitting defeat. So Marian dressed in her finest gown, a creation of sapphire silk that matched her new jewellery, and accompanied her husband to what proved a disaster. From the moment they arrived, the hostility was palpable. Women turned away when Marian approached. Conversations faltered, then resumed in pointed whispers. Even the gentlemen, usually more courteous, regarded her with barely concealed disdain. The breaking point came when Marian overheard Lady Ashworth, holding forth to a circle of matrons. "The Duke has quite lost his wits," she declared with malicious satisfaction, "to marry such a creature, plain, poor, and past her prime. One can only assume she employed some manner of entrapment. I heard she claimed to be increasing," another lady contributed, "forced him to marry her to avoid scandal." "Impossible," Lady Ashworth scoffed. "She is far too old to conceive. No, I suspect she simply wore down his resistance through persistence. Some women have no shame." Marian stood frozen behind a column, each word a dagger to her heart. She wanted to flee, to hide, to disappear entirely, but William appeared at her elbow, his face like stone. "We are leaving," he said quietly. "Just now, William. Now, Marian." He escorted her from the ballroom with glacial dignity, ignoring the curious stares and whispered speculation. Once in their carriage, the facade crumbled. William pulled Marian into his arms as she finally surrendered to tears. "I am so sorry," she sobbed. "I have ruined everything. Your reputation, your standing in society, your future. You should never have married me." "Do not," William said fiercely. "Do not apologize for existing, Marian. Those people are beneath contempt. Their opinions mean less than nothing to me. But they are your peers, your social circle. How can you simply dismiss them?" "Quite easily, as it happens." He tipped her face up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me carefully, my love. I chose you knowing exactly what the consequences would be. I chose you because I wanted you, because I needed you, because my life was empty without you. That has not changed, and it will not change regardless of what idiots like Lady Ashworth say. But your position, my position is secure. I am a duke, Marian. I could marry a serving girl and society would eventually accept it because they have no choice. You are not even that far removed from their ranks. You are a gentleman's daughter, educated and refined. Their mockery says everything about their pettiness and nothing about your worth." Marian wanted to believe him, but the wounds were too fresh. "Perhaps we should retire to Derbyshire," she suggested. "Leave London and its cruelty behind." "We could," William agreed. "But that feels like retreat. I would prefer to stand and fight. I am tired of fighting." He was silent for a long moment, his hand stroking her hair with gentle repetition. "Then we shall rest," he said finally. "Go to Derbyshire, spend time away from this madness, but we will return, Marian. I will not allow them to drive us permanently away." They departed for Derbyshire the following week. The estate proved everything William had promised, a gracious manor house surrounded by extensive gardens and rolling parkland. The servants welcomed their new duchess with genuine warmth, uninfluenced by London gossip. For the first time since their marriage, Marian felt she could breathe freely. The days settled into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were spent exploring the estate or working in the gardens. Afternoons brought reading, correspondence, and quiet conversation. Evenings were devoted to music, cards, and the growing intimacy between husband and wife. Marian discovered that marriage to William was everything she had not dared hope for. He was attentive without being smothering, affectionate without being demanding. They could spend hours in comfortable silence or talk deep into the night about everything and nothing. The physical aspect of their union, initially awkward, had evolved into something beautiful and affirming. "I have never been this happy," she confessed one evening as they sat before the library fire. "Even with all the difficulties in London, this, being your wife, it is more than I ever dreamed possible." William pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Then we are well matched, for you have brought joy I thought forever beyond my reach." The peace lasted 3 months. Then the letter arrived from London, delivered by William's secretary, who had remained in town to manage affairs. William read it with growing fury, his expression darkening with each paragraph. "What is it?" Marian asked, alarmed by his reaction. "A letter from my cousin Reginald," William said tightly. "It seems the gossip has taken a more malicious turn. There are rumors that you married me under false pretenses, that you claim to be increasing to force my hand. But that is absurd. We both know. Of course it is absurd. But the rumor has gained traction, apparently, fueled by Lady Ashworth and her circle. Reginald writes that our credibility is suffering. He urges me to address the slander publicly or risk permanent damage to the family name." Marian felt sick. How does one address such lies? What could we possibly say that would convince them? "I have no intention of defending you against such filth," William replied grimly. "But I will not allow Lady Ashworth to spread malicious falsehoods unchecked. I shall return to London and address this directly. I am coming with you. Marian, that may not be wise, confronting your accusers." "I am coming with you," she repeated firmly. "These lies concern me. I will not hide in Derbyshire while you fight alone." William studied her face, seeing the determination there. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. We face this together." The journey back to London was accomplished in tense silence, both of them preparing mentally for the battle ahead. William's strategy was simple: confront Lady Ashworth directly and demand a public retraction of her claims. Marian's role was to stand beside him, visible proof of her dignity and his continued regard. They went first to Lady Ashworth's residence, requesting an audience that could not be refused without causing offence. The lady received them in her drawing room, her expression suggesting she had bitten into something sour. "Your Grace," she greeted William with a curtsy, pointedly ignoring Marian. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" "You know precisely why I am here, Lady Ashworth," William replied coldly. "Shall the rumours you have been spreading about my wife cease immediately, or I shall make you regret ever learning her name?" Lady Ashworth's eyes widened with feigned innocence. "Rumours? I am certain I do not know what you mean, Your Grace." "You have been telling anyone who will listen that my wife trapped me into marriage with false claims of pregnancy. You will retract those statements publicly, or I shall ensure you are ostracized from every drawing room in London." "You have no such power," Lady Ashworth blustered, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "Do I not? I am the Duke of Harrington. My family predates the Ashworths by 3 centuries. My influence in society and Parliament far exceeds yours. If I choose to destroy you, Lady Ashworth, you will find yourself with no allies and fewer friends. Your daughters will become unmarriageable. Your sons will be blackballed from their clubs. Is your petty malice worth such consequences?" The threat was delivered with icy precision. Lady Ashworth blanched, recognizing the steel beneath William's words. "Your Grace, I merely repeated gossip I heard from others." "You originated it," William interrupted. "Do not insult my intelligence by claiming otherwise. You have 3 days to issue a public apology to my wife. If you fail to do so, I shall make good on my promise. Do we understand each other?" "Yes," Lady Ashworth whispered, her earlier bravado evaporating. "Yes, Your Grace." "Excellent. Come, Marian. The air here has become rather foul." They departed without another word, leaving Lady Ashworth white and shaken. In the carriage, Marian released the breath she had been holding. "That was rather magnificent," she said. "That was necessary," William corrected. "I will not allow anyone to malign you unchecked. Lady Ashworth needed to understand that attacking you means attacking me, and I am a considerably more formidable enemy than she anticipated." True to William's prediction, Lady Ashworth issued a carefully worded apology within 2 days. It appeared in the Times, expressing regret for any misunderstandings regarding the Duchess of Harrington and acknowledging that all previous speculation had been entirely without foundation. The retraction was grudging but public, and its effect was immediate. Invitations began arriving again at the ducal residence. Hostesses who had pointedly excluded Marian now wrote expressing hopes that Her Grace might honour their gatherings with her presence. The change was mercenary rather than genuine, motivated by fear of William's influence rather than any real acceptance of Marian, but it represented progress nonetheless. "Do you see?" William said as they reviewed the latest batch of invitations. "Society responds to strength. Show weakness. and they devour you, display power, and they bow. It is a rather cynical philosophy, Marian observed. Perhaps, but effective. He set aside the invitations, turning his attention fully to her. How are you truly faring, my love? These past months have been difficult. I know you have borne the brunt of society's cruelty with grace, but I also know it has cost you dearly. Marian considered the question carefully. How was she faring? The constant scrutiny had been exhausting, the whispers and snubs painful. But there had also been unexpected joys, the deepening bond with William, the respect of the servants, the knowledge that she had value beyond her usefulness to others. I am well, she said finally. Not unscathed, perhaps, but well. I have you, William, and that compensates for a multitude of social difficulties. You should not have to compensate for anything, he replied, frustration evident in his voice. You should be celebrated, admired, valued for the remarkable woman you are. In an ideal world, perhaps, but we live in this world, with its prejudices and limitations. She took his hand, squeezing gently. I have learned that happiness does not require universal approval. Your love and respect are sufficient. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. You humble me, Marian. Your strength, your resilience, they put my own complaints to shame. We each have our strengths, she murmured against his chest. Yours is action. Mine is endurance. Together we are formidable. The social season progressed with Marian and William navigating the treacherous waters of Haute Tonne with increasing confidence. They attended select events, declined invitations from those who had been particularly cruel, and gradually assembled a circle of genuine friends who valued character over convention. Among these was the Earl of Pembroke and his wife, an older couple who had known William's mother and approved heartily of his choice of bride. Lady Pembroke, in particular, took Marian under her wing, providing guidance on navigating the complex social hierarchy. You must understand, she told Marian over tea one afternoon, that society will always fear what it cannot control. You represented chaos, a woman who violated every expectation by capturing a duke's heart. They lashed out because your success threatened their comfortable assumptions. I threatened nothing, Marian protested. I merely accepted the regard of a man who chose to offer it. Precisely, you accepted rather than schemed, which made your triumph all the more disturbing to those who believe marriage must be a calculated campaign. Lady Pembroke smiled warmly. But you have weathered the storm admirably, my dear. In time, you may even find yourself admired for the very qualities they initially scorned. I doubt that sincerely. Then you underestimate the Tonne's capacity for revision. Once you produce an heir, all will be forgiven. They may even claim they supported you from the beginning. The mention of an heir made Marian's stomach clench. It had been 4 months since the wedding, and she had not yet conceived. Each month brought renewed disappointment and, increasingly, fear that Catherine had been right, that she was too old, that her body would not cooperate, that she would fail in her most fundamental duty as a duchess. William had said nothing, but Marian wondered if he noticed, if he worried, if he regretted choosing a bride who might not provide the heirs his title required. The anxiety gnawed at her, souring her happiness with persistent dread. Her fears crystallized into certainty one evening when she overheard William speaking with his steward in the study. She had been passing the half-open door when her own name arrested her steps. The entail requires a direct heir, Your Grace, the steward was saying. If the Duchess proves unable to conceive, we should discuss alternative arrangements for the succession. There is time yet, William replied. We have been married only a few months. Of course, Your Grace, though given her Grace's age, time may be more limited than one might prefer. If I may speak plainly— Marian did not wait to hear more. She fled to her chambers, humiliation and despair warring within her. They were already discussing her failure, already planning for her inadequacy. She had known this was a possibility, had even tried to warn William, but hearing it confirmed so boldly devastated her. She was still sitting dry-eyed and shaking when William entered an hour later. Marian, you did not come down for dinner. Are you unwell? I heard you, she said flatly, speaking with Mr. Harrison about the succession. About my failure to conceive. William's expression tightened. You were not meant to hear that conversation. Clearly, but I did, and now I know what you truly think. The words tumbled out, fueled by fear and pain. You regret marrying me. You regret choosing a woman too old to give you children. That is not true, William said sharply. Marian, you are distorting. Am I? Your steward spoke of alternative arrangements. You did not deny the concern about my age. She stood abruptly, unable to remain still. Perhaps Catherine was right. Perhaps I have trapped you into a marriage that will bring you nothing but disappointment. Stop! William crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders firmly. You will stop this immediately. I have never regretted marrying you, not for one moment. Not even if we remain childless for the rest of our days. You say that now, but I say it now, and I will continue saying it every day for the rest of our lives, if necessary. He gentled his grip, his expression softening. Marian, listen to me. Mr. Harrison raised the issue of succession because it is his duty to consider all eventualities. I told him there was time because there is. You are 35, not ancient. Many women conceive at your age or older. But many do not, Marian whispered. And if I am among those who cannot, then we shall deal with that if and when it occurs. I have cousins aplenty to inherit if necessary. The estate will not fall into ruin. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I married you for yourself, Marian, not for your womb. If children come, I shall be delighted. If they do not, I shall still count myself the most fortunate of men for having you. How can you mean that? An heir is essential. You are essential, he interrupted. You, Marian, your presence, your love, your companionship, those are what matter to me. The rest is merely duty, and duty holds no appeal when compared to happiness. Marian searched his face for signs of falsehood or reassurance offered merely to comfort her. She found only sincerity and a tenderness that made her throat constrict with emotion. I'm afraid, she confessed, afraid of failing you, of proving Catherine right, of being the wrong choice after all. You could never be the wrong choice. William drew her into his arms, holding her with gentle strength. You are my choice, Marian. The only choice that matters. Everything else is secondary. She clung to him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Perhaps he meant what he said. Perhaps love could indeed be enough, even without the children society demanded. It was a radical notion, one that violated every expectation placed upon ducal marriages, but then their entire union had been built on defying convention. I love you, she said against his chest, so very much. And I love you. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. That is all we need, truly. The rest is merely decoration. 3 weeks later, Marian woke feeling distinctly unwell. The nausea that had plagued her for the past several mornings intensified, and she barely made it to the wash basin before losing the contents of her stomach. When the spasm passed, she sat back on her heels, heart pounding with sudden realization. She was late, nearly a fortnight late, in fact, though she had attributed the irregularity to stress. Combined with the morning sickness, the tender breasts, the unusual fatigue, all signs pointed to one conclusion. She might be with child. The possibility filled her with equal parts terror and exhilaration. She wanted desperately to tell William, but feared premature announcement. What if she was mistaken? What if her body was merely playing cruel tricks? Better to wait, to be certain, before raising hopes that might be dashed. She consulted with the family physician discreetly, enduring an examination that left her blushing furiously. Dr. Winters emerged from his ministrations with a satisfied expression. Congratulations, Your Grace. By my estimation, you are approximately 6 weeks along. All appears normal and healthy. 6 weeks. Marian performed rapid calculations, realizing conception must have occurred during their time in Derbyshire, during those peaceful weeks when she had felt truly happy for the first time in her life. It seemed fitting, somehow, that new life should begin in a period of such contentment. How certain are you? She asked, still afraid to believe fully. As certain as one can be at this early stage. The signs are all consistent. If the pregnancy continues normally, you should expect to deliver sometime in late spring. Dr. Winters smiled kindly. I recommend rest, moderate exercise, and avoiding excessive emotional turmoil. Shall I inform His Grace? No, Marian said quickly. That is, I would prefer to tell him myself in my own way. She waited until that evening, after dinner when they had retired to their private sitting room. William was reading correspondence, his brow furrowed with concentration over some political matter. Marian watched him for a long moment, memorizing this instant before their lives changed irrevocably. "William." He looked up immediately, attuned to the nuances of her tone. "Yes, my love? I have something to tell you, something important." He set aside his papers, giving her his full attention. "You are frightening me slightly. Has something happened?" "Yes, something rather significant." She moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in hers. "I am with child." The silence stretched interminably. William stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and finally blazing joy. "Truly, you are certain. Dr. Winters confirmed it this afternoon, approximately 6 weeks along." A laugh escaped him, startled and delighted. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she might shatter. "Marian, my God, Marian, this is... I cannot..." Words failed him, but his embrace communicated everything his voice could not. When he finally released her, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Are you well? Is everything progressing normally?" "Dr. Winters says all appears healthy, though I confess the morning sickness is rather tiresome. You shall have anything you need. Whatever provides comfort. We must ensure..." He stopped, a thought occurring to him. "We should return to Derbyshire. The air is better there, less strain from social obligations. William, I am pregnant, not infirm. I can manage London for a few more weeks at least. But the strain, the stress, the gossips will be present regardless of our location." She took his face in her hands, touched by his concern. "I am stronger than you think. This pregnancy does not render me fragile. Nevertheless, I intend to treat you as though you were spun from glass until our child arrives safely." His hand moved to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "You carry something infinitely precious." "Two infinitely precious things," she corrected. "The baby and myself." "Three," he amended. "The baby, you and my heart, which you have possessed completely since the moment we met." The declaration, so openly emotional, made Marian's breath catch. William was not typically given to such sentimentality, preferring to demonstrate affection through action rather than words. That he offered this glimpse into his heart moved her profoundly. "I love you," she said, the words inadequate but heartfelt. "And I love you. Both of you." He leaned down to kiss her stomach with tender reverence, and Marian felt tears prick her eyes at the gesture. News of the pregnancy spread through London with predictable speed. The announcement in the Times brought an avalanche of congratulations, many from quarters that had previously been hostile. It seemed Lady Pembroke had been correct. A coming heir absolved a multitude of social sins. Catherine sent a stiff note expressing pleasure at the news and hoping for a successful delivery. No invitation to reconcile accompanied the message, but the acknowledgement was more than Marian had expected. She responded with equal formality, maintaining civility if not warmth. Arabella's letter proved more surprising. The girl wrote expressing genuine happiness for her aunt and hoping they might resume acquaintance in the future. She confessed that her own engagement to a baronet, while not as grand as she had once hoped, had brought unexpected contentment. The maturity evident in her words suggested that time and experience had softened some of her earlier sharp edges. Only Louisa's response was unequivocally joyful. The girl arrived at the townhouse in defiance of Catherine's continued prohibition, throwing herself into Marian's arms with tears of happiness. "A baby? Oh, Aunt Marian, this is the most wonderful news. May I come visit after it is born? I should dearly love to help with the nursery." "Of course, darling. You shall always be welcome here." Marian held her niece close, grateful for this one family connection that had survived intact. The pregnancy progressed normally through the autumn and into winter. Marian endured the discomforts with good grace, sustained by William's unwavering attentiveness and the knowledge that she was fulfilling her duty even as she created new life. They retired to Derbyshire for the coldest months, seeking the peace and clean air of the countryside. It was there on a grey February morning that the pains began. They started as a dull ache in her lower back, gradually intensifying until Marian could no longer pretend nothing was amiss. William, who had been reading aloud to her, immediately set aside his book. "Is it time?" "I believe so, though Dr. Winters said first labours often take many hours. We should summon him, but there is no need for panic." William looked as though panic was precisely his preferred response, but he controlled himself admirably. sending for the physician and the midwife while ensuring Marion was made comfortable. The next 18 hours tested both their endurance. Labor proved every bit as difficult as Marion had been warned. The pain came in relentless waves, each stronger than the last, until she thought she could not bear another moment. William remained at her side, despite the midwife's protests that birthing rooms were no place for husbands. Holding Marion's hand and murmuring encouragement, even when she cursed him for getting her into this condition. "I'm never doing this again," she panted during a brief respite between contractions. "Whatever you wish, my love," William agreed, looking nearly as haggard as she felt. "I mean it. This one child shall have to suffice." "Absolutely. One is perfect, ideal even." The midwife caught Marion's eye and smiled knowingly. She had clearly heard such declarations before and understood they rarely survived beyond the first year of parenthood. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the baby arrived in a rush of blood and fluid. The midwife caught the infant expertly, holding it up for examination. "A girl, your graces, small but healthy." A girl. Marion had not realized how much she had feared disappointing William with a daughter, rather than the heir he needed. But when she looked at her husband's face, she saw only wonder and relief. "A daughter," he breathed. "We have a daughter." The midwife cleaned the baby and placed her in Marion's arms. The infant was red-faced and furious at being expelled from her warm haven, her tiny fists waving in protest. Marion looked down at her daughter, and felt something fundamental shift inside her heart. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." William leaned over them both, his finger stroking the baby's impossibly soft cheek. "She is perfect." "Absolutely perfect." "She is rather wrinkled and angry," Marion observed with exhausted amusement. "Perfect," William insisted. He kissed Marion's temple. "Thank you, for her, for surviving, for being extraordinary." "I did nothing extraordinary. Women have babies every day. You did something extraordinary for me." His voice was thick with emotion. "You gave me a family, Marion. A real family, built on love rather than duty. That is a gift beyond price." The baby chose that moment to let out a surprisingly lusty wail, demanding attention. The midwife swooped in to help Marion attempt feeding, and the room dissolved into the timeless chaos of new parenthood. They named her Catherine Anne. Catherine for William's mother, Anne for Marion's. The choice of names represented a bridge between past and future, honoring those who had come before while creating something entirely new. Catherine thrived, growing from an angry red newborn into a plump, contented infant with her father's grey eyes and her mother's dark hair. William proved a besotted parent, spending hours in the nursery. Despite the raised eyebrows, such behavior provoked among the more traditional servants. Marion often found him simply watching their daughter sleep, his expression soft with wonder. "I never imagined this," he confessed one night, as they stood together over the cradle. "Never allowed myself to hope for such happiness." "Nor did I," Marion agreed. "For most of my life, I believed I would remain forever on the periphery, useful but unseen, necessary but unvalued. You changed all that, William." He pulled her close, and they stood united in the darkness, watching their daughter dream. In that moment, Marion reflected on the improbable journey that had brought her here, from invisible spinster to beloved wife and mother, from worthless burden to valued partner. It had required courage she had not known she possessed, a willingness to accept happiness when it was offered, rather than retreating into familiar misery. It had demanded she redefine herself on her own terms, rather than accepting society's narrow definitions. Most importantly, it had taught her that worth was not determined by youth or beauty or conventional accomplishment, but by the content of one's character and the love one could give and receive. Spring arrived, and with it came their return to London. Society received them with considerably more warmth than before. The successful delivery of a healthy child had accomplished what no amount of social maneuvering could achieve. It had rendered Marion respectable. Invitations flooded in. Hostesses competed for their attendance, and former detractors now praised the Duchess of Harrington's dignity and grace. "How quickly they forget their cruelty," Marion observed, as she sorted through the latest batch of invitations. "They do not forget," William corrected. "They simply revise history to place themselves on the winning side. It is the way of society. A rather depressing assessment, but accurate. He looked up from his newspaper. Does it bother you, their sudden admiration after months of scorn? Marian considered the question. Less than it might have. I have learned that others' opinions of me are merely that, opinions. They do not define my value or determine my happiness. Only I can do that. When did you become so wise? Approximately 9 months ago, when a certain duke forced me to recognize my own worth by valuing me so completely. William set aside his newspaper, crossing to where she sat. He pulled her to her feet, drawing her into his arms with the easy intimacy of long practice. You give me too much credit. The worth was always there, so I merely had the good sense to recognize it. Nevertheless, you changed my life, William. Changed me. I am not the same woman who fell in a ballroom and expected to be left lying on the floor. No, he agreed. You are stronger now, more confident. Though I confess I miss that woman's gratitude. She was far more deferential than my current Duchess. Marian laughed, swatting his chest lightly. Your current Duchess has learned she need not be deferential to be valued. A dangerous lesson. He kissed her nose. I have created a monster. You have created a partner. There is a difference. Indeed there is. His expression sobered, becoming tender. I want you to know something, Marian. These months with you and Catherine, they have been the happiest of my life. Not because you fulfilled some duty by providing an heir, but because you have given me what I never dared hope for. A home filled with love, rather than merely beautiful objects. The confession moved Marian deeply. And you have given me purpose beyond usefulness, value beyond function. We have saved each other, I think. Then we are the most fortunate of fools, to have found salvation in each other when society predicted only disaster. They stood together in the morning light streaming through the windows, two people who had defied expectations to build something genuine and lasting. Outside, London continued its endless social dance. But within these walls, Marian and William had created their own world, one founded on mutual respect, growing love, and the quiet triumph of choosing each other against all odds. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. The nurse entered carrying Catherine, who had woken from her nap demanding attention. William took his daughter immediately, cradling her with practiced ease. Good afternoon, my darling. Did you sleep well? He bounced her gently, earning a gurgling laugh that made his entire face light up. Marian watched husband and daughter together, her heart full to bursting. This, she thought, was what happiness looked like. Not grand gestures or social triumphs, but simple moments of connection, of being fully present with those one loved. She thought of the woman she had been, the invisible aunt, the overlooked spinster, the burden tolerated but not cherished. That woman seemed like a stranger now, or perhaps a chrysalis that had contained her true self until the right circumstances allowed emergence. What are you thinking? William asked, noticing her expression. That I am grateful, Marian replied. For all of it, the struggles, the pain, the social battles, they led me here, to this moment, to you and Catherine. I would not change any of it. Not even the champagne incident, William teased. Not even that. Especially not that, actually, since it brought us together. Then we must raise a glass to clumsy accidents and champagne-soaked gowns. He shifted Catherine to one arm, offering his hand to Marian. Come, let us take our daughter for a walk in the garden. The roses are blooming, and I would show them to her. Marian took his hand, and together they walked into the spring afternoon, their daughter cradled between them. Behind them lay a year of transformation, from strangers to partners, from mockery to respect, from loneliness to love. Ahead stretched a future rich with possibility, built on the foundation of their improbable but undeniable connection. Society would continue to gossip, would find new scandals to dissect and new victims to judge, but Marian no longer cared. She had found something more valuable than social approval. She had found herself, and in doing so, had found everything she needed. As they entered the garden, Catherine laughing at the butterflies dancing among the roses, William squeezed Marian's hand gently. She looked up to find him watching her with an expression of such profound contentment that it took her breath away. I love you, he said simply. Today, tomorrow, always. And I love you, Marian replied, the words carrying the weight of absolute truth. Always. The end.